Good afternoon and welcome to another in our series of TalkSports. It's our Saturday Sports special. And I'm Michael Bascom, your host, live from Brooklyn in New York. It's a bit on the mild side, I would say. Very mild indeed. We expect some rain later on into Sunday. But other than that, it's pretty mild for spring-like weather here in New York. Well, on today's program, that's this weekend, we'll be speaking to two sports journalists and looking at sports in the region. But both journalists, sports journalists, one will be in the first hour, the other in the second hour, looking at new initiatives. We'll also be talking about sports in the OECS. Yes, sports in the OECS Sports Desk, regional sports administrators. So have been happening over the last few months, and the pandemic, that's the COVID-19 pandemic, would not have eased up on what has been happening regarding sports in the OECS. But also, we'll be keeping tab on what's taking place in the track and field world in particular, because we have a number of athletes who are competing this weekend. Kirani James opening his season later on in Arizona. He'll be competing in the 400 meters. And then we also have Anderson Peters, who will also be competing today in the javelin event. Then we have some of the college athletes who also will be competing. So lots happening, definitely. And we're hoping to keep tab on all these happenings throughout our program. No doubt, there's also cricket being played in Grenada. That's the Grenada Cricket Association's under 19 tournament at the cricket stadium. And there is also a development meet taking place at the stadium at track and field that's next door. So a lot's happening, and it's good to see that sports is really bouncing back to an extent. And no doubt we hope it's the same that's happening, that is actually taking place in the various islands. So we'll have an idea of what's happening when we get ready to speak with our sports journalist. And as I said, Colin James will be our first speaker. He'll be our first guest, rather, on the program, and then he'll be followed by Vernon Springer, our good friend Vernon Springer. Colin is actually based in Antigua, and Vernon in St. Kitts, and they will be giving us an update as to what's happening. Well, Colin is the editor of the SportsWorld Antigua. It's a new digital magazine and sports magazine, to be exact, and we'll be hearing all about that initiative, as well as what's happening in Antigua regarding sports. As you recall, Antigua has been a hub for cricket for the past few months in terms of West Indies cricket, and it's also the headquarters for the Cricket West Indies. So quite a bit we'll be discussing there. And then Vernon comes in the next hour, where we'll be speaking directly about the as you know, Vernon was one of the commentators during the last series with Sri Lanka. And we'll be talking more so about sports in the OECS, the OECS Sports Desk, regional sports administration, because a lot has been happening. And also how the pandemic has affected sports in the OECS. So join us from around 2 o'clock for that segment. But Colin James is the person who will lead us off in the first discussion with the whole initiative of SportsWorld Antigua, and Colin is standing by, and then we'll have Vernon coming on. Just to repeat again that we'll be keeping tab on the developments regarding the cricket at the National Stadium, the cricket stadium in Grenada, the development meet at the Kirani James Athletic Stadium, and then we have our athletes who are competing in various meets, especially in North America. Kirani James opening his season, and then we have Anderson Peters, who competing. Shamar Fletcher is also competing at the Drakes Relay today. That's something I should have mentioned. That's Shamar. And then we want to congratulate Gamali Felix, who no doubt is improving bit by bit. He is aiming for at least a sub 46. He's right around there, 46 low, 46.2. And he is will be one of those that we have to keep tab on. Let me see if now I can go over to Colin James, who is in Buckley's and somewhere in Antigua. I would say, yeah, it's Buckley's Antigua. Good afternoon to you, Colin.
Hey, good afternoon to you, Mike, and good afternoon to your viewers and listeners. Great to be on your show, as usual. Always a very interesting program, and I always listen forward to hear what some of your viewers and listeners would have to say.
Well, no doubt we'll want to hear what you have to say, more or less, regarding the new initiative, as I indicated in the intro, the SportsWorld Antigua, and all that has been happening in sports in Antigua. So first of all, Colin, tell us more about SportsWorld Antigua, this whole initiative, how you started with this project and how it's going so far.
Well, SportsWorld has been an initiative that I've been thinking about for a number of years now. I would have started off with some specialized publications back in, let's say, around 2012, especially when Antigua and Barbuda were campaigning in the World Cup qualifying for the 2014 World Cup. We had done a couple of publications. We did one as well in 2019 for the England Tour of the Caribbean. So we had looked at the whole scenario with sports being locked down in 2020 and thought about the whole idea of trying to do something now to give our readers a perspective of what has been happening during the pandemic and what can be expected coming out of the pandemic, and also to continue to feature not only sportsmen and women in Antigua and Barbuda, but across the region and internationally as well, because we felt that it was important for our readers to get an idea of what has been happening during the pandemic, and even more so, also give them a perspective of what to look forward to in terms of talent coming out of the Caribbean generally, and also continue to feature our world-class athletes in Antigua, the region, who are looking ahead towards the Olympic Games, the West Indies cricket tours, different events that are taking place around the world, which feature Caribbean athletes and Antigua and Barbuda athletes in particular.
Okay. So thus far, how you will say things have been going, a couple editions already out. What's the feedback like you have been receiving?
Yeah, well, we have so far featured 5 editions, and so what it's all about, it's a digital publication. In other words, it's online, and we have about 5,000 subscribers so far in terms of those who we have sent it to. We have sent it to a number of chat rooms on WhatsApp, and we have also featured it we have sent it out via email and also via our Facebook page, SportsWorld, and also High Stakes Media Group Facebook page. So far, it has been getting a lot of traction across the world. We have a number of connections with not only athletes, but sports administrators, people who are involved in sports in a general sense, who have also caught on to the idea of SportsWorld. So we are basically being featured quite extensively across the globe. Maybe in another month or so, we might be in a position that we can print it and begin to sell it on the local market as a first step. And then if possible, we can get it into the regional markets and the international markets as well. Because one of the first things some of our advertisers had asked us is if the magazine is for sale. And when we indicated to them it's going to be an online digital publication, they were of the view that to maximize on their advertising dollars, they would love to see it being sold locally as well, meaning solo in Antigua and Barbuda. So those who are shopping at the various business places, the supermarkets, the pharmacies, the bookstores, and the different outlets that sell magazines and newspapers and so on, those customers too will have a chance to pick up a copy. So we're working on getting that part of the bargain organized in terms of getting it printed, and maybe in a month or so we'll be able to consolidate that initiative.
Mm-hmm. And fully covered, colored, I should say, right? Colored.
Yes. Well, everything these days is in color, so we can't come, anything shorter than that. And the fact too that if not all, most of our photos are in color, it means that we have to follow suit. As we continue to dig maybe into our archives, we might get one or two black and white photos, but I doubt that is going to be possible at this time. But be that as it may, we'll continue to work with color photos. There might be a few black and white photos in our archives because, as you would know, Mike, I've been involved in media, journalism, sports reporting for the better part of 35 years, from since about 80 to 83. Working professionally from since about 1984 in sports. So there are a number of photos and articles that I would have saved over the period of time. So we might be going back down memory lane to feature some of those exciting or some of those memorable stories and photos that would have captivated the sporting fraternity over the last 30, 35, 40 years or so.
Mm-hmm. You were one of those who may not have been affected by any of the natural disasters. I know a lot of people would have lost photos and other things from hurricanes and what have you, but it appears that you're not really affected.
Well, in a sense, you can say that since about 1985, Antigua and Barbuda, like some other Caribbean islands, have been experiencing quite a few hurricanes. Maybe the good thing for me is that I have not been affected too much by any hurricane since 1995 in terms of structural damage or internal damage at my property. And I can remember back in my days at the Antigua Sun newspaper, back between 1997, 98, 99, I think up to 2001, I was able to archive a number of photographs or keep them in a very safe place since during that period. And over the number of years since the mid-1980s going forward too, I would have been able to save quite a bit of number of newspaper clippings. I don't know if you remember the days of the EC News newspaper, where myself and Hamlet Mark were quite prominent in terms of writing a weekly column for the EC News newspaper. Also, too, I would have done a number of writings for the Nation newspaper, the Jamaica Observer, also the Trinidad Express, and other regional newspapers. And then, going to cover a number of international events like I think I covered 2 or 3 Olympic Games, Pan American Games, Commonwealth Games since 2002. You'd have built up quite an archive of information and photos and so on, memorabilia that you'd want to feature from time to time in the SportsWorld newspaper, SportsWorld magazine, as some people call it.
Yeah, very much recall EC News. Those were the days when you would probably say that we had active sports journalists, Colin.
Well, it was the OECS Sports Desk. The OECS Sports Desk was very big in terms of having activities. The Rex Pereira, the organizer of the OECS Sports Desk, he made sure there were a number of activities taking place across the sub-region in terms of OECS sports. Just about everything. From cricket, netball, basketball, football, track and field, bodybuilding, you name it. The OECS Sports Desk was there. So almost on a weekly basis, you had something happening in a Caribbean island, and with the sports desk at the OECS Secretariat organizing good deals with Leah, the Caribbean airline, as it was then. 50% travel at the time for sporting teams to move across the sub-region, sometimes including Barbados. It was a really great time for sports in the OECS from, let's say, the mid-1980s right through until about maybe 2000 or so, if I'm being generous with that time period. But it was really a great time for sports in the sub-region. And then you had the other national associations or regional associations with their different sporting events. You like the games, you had the Caribbean Football Union Championship, you had the regional cricket tournaments, whether it be the Red Stripe Cup, the Red Stripe Bowl, the 4-day tournament, the 1-day tournaments, the touring teams coming to the Caribbean for cricket. And, just a plethora of sports taking place around the sub-region. And that would have been, a great thing for not only the sub-region, but the Caribbean as a whole.
Yeah. Colin, just one thing, if you can just, I think we're not seeing much of you, right? Yeah, I think you need to be a little up so we can see the face. I think somehow you hide it in the background. Yeah, probably too much of the headroom, but we need to see. Yeah, but it's an important point you're making there, and I think you are basically driving home the point for something like SportsWorld Antigua. Its relevance, I should say, for SportsWorld Antigua, because in the final analysis, and what is important is also documenting, documenting so that later on, it's available, because I am certain that you spoke about the EC News, for example, and there might be folks who wonder what it is you're talking about. Is there something that's there that can make reference to EC News, except yourself and Hamlet and others just talking about it? And the internet, as it is now, is giving life to all that you're speaking about, because we know that 10 years from now, at least, there will be some archive of SportsWorld Antigua.
Yes. Well, what I can say about EC News in that respect, we'd have to ask the powers that be at the Nation newspaper in Barbados to really give us an opportunity to go through their archives, because they were the parent body or the parent company that was in charge of the EC News. Basically, the EC News was a sub-desk of the Nation newspaper. Charles Hardin, he was the editor, so he operated from Barbados in terms of the whole management of the editorial content that went into the EC News. So in terms of archive material, they would have, if not all, most of the issues that came out in terms of the EC News. What I could endeavor to do for you, Mike, is that maybe sometime in the near future, in another week or so, I could maybe go to my archives and maybe give you a few copies of some of the issues or some of the clippings of the EC News, so you can share with your audience. But certainly, if we were going to do any justice to the EC News, basically we'd have to tap into the resources of the Nation newspaper in Barbados to get a look-see of some of the editions of the EC News. And, it also forged a sort of regional integration, because not only it featured sports, it was very heavy in terms of the news coming out of the OECS countries. And every OECS country was featured on a weekly basis. There was a correspondent in all OECS countries. I only mentioned the fact that myself and Hamlet had written weekly opinion columns, because of the fact that at that time it was Grenada and Antigua and Barbuda were seen as the two main avenues or main center for sports in the sub-region. I know Grenada at that time was very big on track and field, as you still are, and Antigua for cricket and football and even netball. Grenada with netball and as well. St. Lucia would have been for volleyball and to some extent football as well, and the different islands. So, the EC News really covered, as the name suggested, the Eastern Caribbean.
Well, and it's a nice segue to our conversation, but let me just say good afternoon to Kathy Harper Hall. The good old days, as she says, the good old days of Caribbean sports, and as she said, this is Kathy Harper Hall, reminiscence with you, obviously.
Yeah, and I know Kathy had a good relationship with Reds. The number of times they would have come to Antigua to do different workshops, not only in netball, because we all know Kathy has been and is still very instrumental in netball in the Caribbean, but she was also very instrumental in boxing. Surprisingly, and that was a sport in the OECS that was very prominent during the time of the EC News, because we had a very thriving boxing program in Antigua. I can remember the days of the Woodbury Park gym. Warren Woodbury, an American who came to Antigua and really had a dynamic program, and that filtered down into the Caribbean, into the other OECS countries, including Barbados as well. Grenada had a very good boxing program, as I remembered it, and the other OECS countries were big in boxing. And you know, if we were able to cast our memories back a bit, we would know that the Cubans had an influence as well in terms of the development of boxing in certain Caribbean, in certain OECS countries. I think Grenada, I can say Grenada benefited a lot from the Cuban influence in terms of boxing. And as Kathy said, yes, she's still involved in netball and boxing. So, you know, we really had a very thriving program there. And I think that, you know, maybe in another, let's give ourselves another 5 years, if the various ministers of sports in the OECS, we can overcome whatever challenges we're going through now, whether it be the COVID-19 pandemic or the volcano in St. Vincent or any hurricane that would have that we might experience between June and November. If we can overcome those challenges and regional airlift resumes in a significant way, I can see a rebirth of interregional sports, because that is very important. And don't forget to Mike that we also had the Windward Islands and Leeward Islands football championships, and then the winners of both competitions would meet for the OECS championship. I can remember coming to Grenada in 1998, I believe, when Antigua won the Leeward Islands leg to play against Grenada. I think that game was played at Tantine. And then Grenada came to Antigua a week later to play the return leg at the police recreation ground. So we're not even talking about matches being played at the main sport venues as we know them now, whether it be the Antigua recreation ground in Antigua or the Cerritos Stadium, which came on the scene in 2007, or the Grenada National Stadium, which came on the scene in 2007 for the Cricket World Cup. You know, there were other venues that were being used while sports was progressing and developing in other shape and form.
You're saying let's give us probably another 5 or so years, but there are those who might be saying we probably had 10, 15 years, and if we wait for another 5 years, we will get left. But before we go on to that point, let me just bring up for those. This, I think, is the latest issue, right?
Yeah, that's the latest issue that came out on Wednesday. We're in the process of putting together the next issue, which comes out tomorrow morning. Basically, so what we had featured there in this latest issue, which was issue number 5, we're featuring. Well, we started by featuring at least one Antiguan young cricketer, Youri Smith, who is heading up to England to play in the Middlesex League. And this is a joint initiative between the Antigua and Barbuda High Commission in London and the Ministry of Sports. Youri is just one of about 5 to 6 young Antiguan cricketers who will be going off to England. I think 4 of them are leaving tomorrow, and another 2 might be leaving during the upcoming week. Also, you would have noticed on the front cover we had a story with a UK boxing coach. Now he was born in England, but his family is from Antigua. So his mother and father grew up in Antigua, migrated to England, and he's now looking to come back home to see how much he can assist the boxing program in Antigua. He's part of a gym in Slouch, and he wants to come back home to see how much he can help develop boxing. So we're just trying to see how much we can give our readers an insight into what is happening during the pandemic, and we also want them to be part of what they would have missed, because the Sri Lanka tour in Antigua for a month, there were absolutely no spectators allowed either at the Coolidge Cricket Ground or the Cerritos Stadium for those matches. So we had 3 T20 internationals, 3 one-day internationals, and 2 test matches, and we featured all those matches, all 8 matches in the first 3-4 issues of SportsWorld. And we also are going to look back at the Super 50, which featured 26 matches between February and March of this year. where Trinidad and Tobago emerged undisputed champions. And also too, between December and March of this year, cricket was reopened in Antigua and Barbuda when the Antigua Barbuda Cricket Association staged a T10, a T10 splash. That's a 10 overs a side competition in December. And then in January, from mid-January until about early March, they had the Super 50, the ABC Super 40, a limited overs competition, 40 overs competition. And for about 6 weeks, the entire country was galvanized in supporting local cricket matches for the first time in about 3 or 4 decades, that like has never been before. And it so happened that the final, which was played on a Sunday afternoon up in Bethesda, which is on the eastern side of the country, we had over 5,000 spectators at that venue. And the game was won off the very last ball of the match, where Anthony Martin, former West Indies and Leeward Islands batsman, playing for Bethesda along with Gavin Tong, the last two, well, not the partnership that won it for Bethesda, the winning partnership. They were the crease, and Anthony Martin got the winning run of the very last ball of the game. And naturally, you're playing on your home ground in terms of Bethesda. You win by 1 run, by what? I think 3 wickets off the last ball of the game. So there was an explosion of spectators going onto the field to support, to celebrate the victory. And that caused a little bit of concern for the health authorities. So since about late March, early April, cricket has gone back down into lockdown in Antigua, as most sports would have been. Except for cycling, I don't think we're playing any competitive sports in Antigua. So it is hoped that the lockdown would be relaxed soon, and cricket can resume, because coming out of that T10 and the Super 40 tournament organized by the Antigua and Barbuda Cricket Association, a number of young talent came to the fore. I can talk to you about an all-rounder called Easton, one opening batsman, left-handed opening batsman with Guyanese heritage. I think his mother is Guyanese, father Antiguan, left-handed batsman and right-arm off-spinner. He's one for the future. We spoke about Yuri Smith. There's also a young man who resembles Sylvester Joseph, very much in mannerism and in batting style. Hilroy Andrew, his younger brother Joel Andrew, Leeward Islands on the 13th captain. They have been among the runs. The Empire team featuring the likes of Marley Richards, the son of the great Sir Vivian Richards, and also Tyrone Williams Jr., Leeward Islands selectee. So, we were really seeing a rebirth of cricket, not only in terms of talent coming to the fore, but also, spectators going out to support their respective teams. So just on a Saturday and a Sunday for about a 6-week period, almost every cricket venue that matches are played in Antigua, the fans were going out in their droves to watch local cricket matches, and that really brought a good feeling to sports in Antigua.
Mm-hmm. And even though, and all of that happening in the midst of the pandemic, which
yes,
and which you believe is a good sign, because once the pandemic hopefully is over, well, let's say so, you believe that things will be on stream in terms of sports and sports development in Antigua.
Yes, as I said, a lot of the associations, national associations in Antigua and Barbuda, would have been putting programs and plans in place to mitigate against the COVID-19 pandemic. The Antigua and Barbuda Football Association, which has the benefit of the biggest spectator supporting association in terms of sports in Antigua, they have not been able to restart the national program. That ended up abruptly in March of 2020, I think the first week of March 2020, when the entire country went into a lockdown. And since then, football on a competitive level has not been played in Antigua and Barbuda. But that has not stopped the ABFA from basically mounting different programs, whether it be coaching programs for its coaches. And just recently, I think it wrapped up on Wednesday evening, the ABFA completed the second of 2 team managers workshop, which were conducted by Patrick Beckles from Barbados. And I think in the last one, over 50 people took part in that. And then in the first one, there were another, 30 or so participants. And then the CONCACAF B license course, which was conducted by Anton Cornell, the son of Alvin Cornell, that involved, I think, 11 to 15 participants. But there could have been more, but you'd have to pass your D and C license to take part in the CONCACAF B license course. The national football team, as you know, would have participated in two Qatar 2022 World Cup qualifying matches. Antigua and Barbuda joined with Montserrat. As you know, the Montserrat team would have been primarily players of Montserrat heritage living in Britain. And ironically, the Montserrat team was being coached by Willie Donachie, who was a technical director in Antigua back in the mid-2000, somewhere between 2008, 2012, I think. And the Antigua Barbuda team, they had two coaches, the head coach, Tom Curtis, and his assistant, Michael Lesherwood. They're based in England, so they came down to see the first match, or supervise the first match against Montserrat, which was played in Curacao because the Antigua Barbuda Football Association could not host the game in Antigua because of COVID issues. But unfortunately for the Antigua Barbuda team, when they were going out to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands to play the U.S. Virgin Islands, the English-based players, there were about 4 players and the 2 coaches, 6 of them could not leave from Curacao to go into the U.S. Virgin Islands via Puerto Rico because the U.S. government had placed a ban on UK travelers. So the ABFA would have been able to overcome those challenges and pull off a 3-0 victory against U.S. Virgin Islands in St. Croix in the World Cup qualifying matches. But I think generally, Antiguan and Barbudans are looking forward to the reopening of sports in the country. As I said, cycling is taking place on a competitive level. They have a meet this weekend. And Sailing Week, which is, you don't really consider Sailing Week a out-and-out sport, but you know that it brings a lot of economic and sporting value to Antigua and Barbuda, which would have been taking place around this time, has now gone into a virtual event. So there was no Sailing Week events in 2020. There are no events this year, but what the organizers have done, they have organized a virtual event, and I think a limited number of boats will be taking part in a virtual event. They're going to be sailing on the southwestern side of the country. I think from Nelson's Dockyard in English Harbour down to Old Road, down to Carlisle Bay in Old Road, and that is going to be a virtual event. So you can follow that event on Facebook in terms of Sailing Week. Track and field, it has received a new lease on life because the Yasco track, which is located just a stone throw away from the Antigua Recreation Grounds, has been resurfaced. That took about 3.5 to 4 years to be completed because of varying issues, but the track has been completely resurfaced. It was done. It was finished in March of this year. Could have been finished by March of last year, but when the lockdown came worldwide, the technicians from Mondo, the people who make the track, those technicians opted to go back home, and they were only able to come back into Antigua in early January, late January, early February. So the entire track at Yasco has been resurfaced, and it's going to be certified for regional international events. So pretty soon, Mike, just as you have the national stadium in Grenada for track and field, I think by July, August, we might have a regional championship for track and field in Antigua. So we might see the Okirani, James, and others coming to Antigua to compete before Tokyo 2020 in 2021.
Interesting enough, but it's good to hear that the track, because I know the president of the Antigua and Barbuda Athletics Association has been talking a lot about having that track, and how it has affected even the preparation of athletes, over the years, especially the international athletes, and athletes preparing for regional championships, including the Curfew Games, So it's good to know that Antigua is the track is back up, and athletes can look forward to competitive meets, because there was once, Colin, you should know that Antigua and Barbuda, when they had the OECS track and field championships. It used to be also the Texaco Games, I think, in Barbados, and Antigua used to have the used to be represented, especially in the long distance events. In the long distance, and there was once Antigua had one of the fastest sprinters in the OECS. All these things. So I'm certain that when it comes to athletics, track and field. Antigua wants to make sure that it's also in the limelight, not just cricket, but track and field. And it's good also to hear that the yachting is back up. We know that there's the annual across the Atlantic racing.
Yes, from La Gomera in Spain to
Spain, right?
That took place. That took place between December and March of this year. And Antigua had, for the first time, Antigua featured appears. Two young men from Antigua took part in that, and I think they came first or second in their category. And they did exceptionally well, because for the first time, it was a two-member team or two-man team, and they were able to come across the Atlantic. Previously, we had first we had the Team Antigua. They were a group of elder citizens or elder statesmen, Dr. Fuller and his team. All of them were featured, were over the age of 60, I think. So there was that four. Then you had Team Antigua, which was a team featuring another four rowers. Eli Fuller, who is the cousin or nephew of Dr. Fuller. They did well as well. And then you had the all-female team of Team Island Girls, four young ladies from Antigua and Barbuda. And then you had this recent one, this team in 2021, two young men who came across the Atlantic. So, although we are in a pandemic, and the social distancing and the different protocols, sports still has been resonating quite well in Antigua and Barbuda and some Caribbean islands as well. I must say too that from the point of view of track and field, CJ Green, who is based overseas, I think he's in Miami, and he trains with MVP International, that famed Jamaican team of athletes or camp. And he has so far clocked 10.01 to qualify for the Tokyo Olympics. Recently, he ran another race, and I think 10 flat. That race was won by the name of the American sprinter who was banned a few times is just escaping me. Justin Gatlin. Yeah, he was part of that race too. So along with Priscilla Frederick, our female high jumper, yeah, she's gearing up for Tokyo. She hasn't qualified as yet. And then there's a young lady by the name of Lloyd. She was dominant at regional junior meets, and also in 2019 she won a silver medal, a silver and a bronze medal at Carifta Games. She's on the college circuit now. She's doing quite well. She's based, I think, in Kentucky. And since the track would have been resurfaced at Yasco, it has been a hive of activity as the young athletes go through their training regimes. And not that they were waiting for Yasco to be completed to be training, because they were using the Antigua Recreation Ground, which is going to go through a major facelift within the next few years. A committee has been formed to look into the whole redevelopment of the Antigua Recreation Ground, but it's going to take quite a bit. I would want to believe that it will take upwards of maybe 20 million or more to really bring the ARG or restore it to what you'd want to see as a modern facility. But that's a discussion for another program, Mike. But the point I'm making is that our athletes were using different venues. Like one of our top coaches, Evans Jawaki Jones, who is the assistant director of sports, he was using the Markpan playing field in All Saints to do his training. And his daughter, Sanaya Jones, who I think is the reigning junior sportswoman of the year, she's also attending college in the US, and from all reports she has been doing well to date. Also Heather Samuel, the director of sports, she has her own track and field club as well. They were using, I think, Cedar Valley and the New Wintraps playing field to train. The Wing Sports Club, they were using, I think, the Cranston High School grounds to do their training. And other clubs were using other venues to do the training. I must mention, too, that there's a young man who left Antigua back in January, I want to believe, to go to Jamaica to train with that club that Usain Bolt came out of, Racers, if that's the name.
Racers.
Yes. So our athletes and our officials would have found ways and means to keep themselves active and also find avenues and opportunities to compete competitively, because they know they can be idle. And I know that there are a number of footballers who are looking to see if they can get college scholarships or continue to get college scholarships to go overseas. And that also, as I indicated, with our cricketers, most of them are looking to go off to England. And as you know, Alzari Joseph, as well as a few of the West Indies players, Alzari's at Worcestershire. The captain, Craig Bradford, he's with Gloucestershire. I think Kemar Roach is with Hampshire. And, a few West Indies players are in the IPL. But I'm just saying that, some of our cricketers are taking the lead that Alzari Joseph would have taken to go to England so they can get, better cricket and also being exposed to a different kind of competition. A name I should mention who has also been instrumental in getting players to England is Robert Joseph. You may not know of him from the point of view that he was one of our marquee former players, but Robert Joseph went to England in the early 2000s as part of an Antiguan team, I believe, and he was picked up by Kent. And he did so well that England had approached him to play for them. I think he made the England B team, or the England Lions, as they call themselves. And he was on the verge of making the England senior team. But I think he got injured and and then didn't recover sufficiently in time to regain his form. But he has been in Antigua for the last 8 months doing some coaching. And I've been in touch with him over the last week or so. And he's going to be taking one of our young upcoming cricketers to England with him as part of a coaching and mentorship experience. In other words, Robert Joseph is going back to England to coach at the league level, and he's taking a young Antiguan cricketer by the name of Kadeem Henry, who came out of the Leeward Islands Youth Tournament with a lot of runs, and I think a double century as well. And Kadeem is going with Robert up to England, and Robert is going to be coaching, but Kadeem is going as part of a mentorship program that Robert was able to organize for him. So a number of opportunities are there for our sportsmen and sportswomen in Antigua and Barbuda, and I just think it's a matter of time before we see sports reopen in Antigua from a competitive point of view, and we can have that inter-village, inter-country, or inter-club competitions going, or club competitions going in Antigua, and more of our sportsmen and women will be competing. We're looking to hear what netball has to offer as well, because they too had organized some coaching programs which were done via Zoom online. And I know Karen Joseph, which is a name that is very popular in the OECS and the Caribbean, one of the top 5 netball shooters ever to have graced the Caribbean stage. Karen is the president of the Netball Association here, and she too has been instrumental in getting programs. And also swimming, although there has not been any competitive swimming in Antigua, those who are in colleges from Antigua and Barbuda have been doing well. A number of them would have bettered their personal best times, and they're just looking forward to coming back home to take part in the national championships and getting ready, I think, for Curfew Games. Curfew is track and field and swimming, and they're working out the logistics of having Curfew in August of this year. I think the track part of it will be in Curacao, Mike?
You mean the
Curfew Games.
Your track and field you're talking about?
Yeah, in Bermuda.
Bermuda.
Yeah, Bermuda, yeah. I don't know where the swimming is going to take place, but I think it might be in Trinidad for Curfew Games swimming. So we have a lot to look forward to, Mike. I guess just like I would have done, you might have to take up your pen and paper again.
Nah, not really. Fully retired. But one of the articles you carried this week has to do with the Super League. That has been hot news over the past week or so, and we have heard various views from folks. despite the reporting and what you have reported, what's your personal view on the Super League?
Well, first of all, I couldn't see how the major clubs in Europe could be thinking about a Super League. I just couldn't understand where that came from. And if I were to use an American jargon, where in left field that came from, or where from left field that came from. And I just had to, look at it from the point of view that it was a matter of the American owners pushing an agenda. There are quite a few American owners who are owning some of the big clubs. Let me say American investors who are owning big clubs in Europe. You know that Liverpool, my club, is owned by the Fenway Sports Group that comes out of the Boston Red Sox organization. The Manchester United, the Glazer family, another American family. Also, you would have Stan Kroenke, who I think is an American owner of Arsenal. Although Abramovich is Russian, he owns Chelsea. And you look around and you see that influence. The clubs in Spain have been struggling badly because of the COVID pandemic in terms of finances. Florentino Perez from Real Madrid and Juan Laporte of Barcelona, they're struggling as well. Some of the Italian clubs are struggling. But I'm just wondering if it wasn't the American influence which would have caused these clubs to look at a Super League. And when I read recently, I think a day or two ago, that JP Morgan, that big American bank, was bankrolling the Super League to the tune of $3 billion US dollars. You can understand the magnitude of the investment that would have gone into the Super League. And although you could sympathize with the clubs for wanting to get some revenue, to recover some lost revenue from the pandemic, I mean, to go and have a completely new breakaway competition where the whole question of relegation and promotion would have been null and void and would have been part of that, really goes against the spirit of what we know sports would be. And coming out of the Caribbean, or looking at it from a Caribbean point of view, where we were basically, we grew up on the British tradition of how sports was being administered, promotion, relegation, different divisions. When you look at the American system, you look at the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, even Major League Soccer, there is no promotion or relegation in those with those franchise organizations. And it comes down to expansion whenever they feel, this is necessary for expansion. And if the British clubs, especially the Chelseas, the Manchester United, the Liverpools, the Arsenal, the Tottenham, were to go down that route, they would be isolating their fans. And it was the revolt of the fans which really caused that backlash against the whole question of a Super League. And as I said in my editorial in the latest issue, to me, it was akin to the West Indies players who opted to go to South Africa in the early 1980s to earn a livelihood on the backs of the sweat and blood of our brothers and sisters in South Africa who were fighting for their freedom. And I just looked at it, from that context. And, I just wondered why they would have come up with such an initiative at this stage, when the Champions League, to me, is the box seller, the box office that you'd want in football.
Well, on a personal note, while I understand, the intricacies and all of that, my issue, and I have to agree with what Shaka Hislop said, my issue was how quick FIFA and UEFA and others were able to respond and react. Yet, when issues as racism and equality and all these issues are on the fore, they remain silent. They remain numb. But because there was something that was aiming directly at their pockets, aiming directly at their power base, within hours, they were able to react. And, probably because of the players and fans' support for, opposition rather to the Super League. I believe that's why it may have flopped. But I don't think UEFA and FIFA would have been able to go alone. They needed the support of fans and players in this regard, because it was glaring that when issues of racism and others, that they do not come out and speak out, and statements and all these sort of things, and because it's something that was going directly at their power base, I think they came out. That's my personal view, and I have to agree with
I share that view, Mike. Yeah, I think you have raised a very important topic there. That I still believe that the football authorities have not done enough to quell racism across the globe, not only in Europe but across the globe generally. And I still believe that more can be done. As I was indicating, coming out of that the workshop for team managers organized by the ABFA. I was part of that, and there was a topic which dealt with the whole question of racism in football. And there's a protocol which says that for the first if there's an incident of racism, that the referee stop the game. So what, 5-10 minutes or so. An announcement is made over the loudspeaker system. If it continues, the match is halted for at least half an hour, with the proviso that if it continues, the game will be called off. And if there's a third time, it's called off. I think that it should be one incident of racism, the game is called off. You don't need 2 and 3 to really stop the game. You don't need 2 or 3 incidents to stop the game. And if the authorities are firm, like if a player commits a red card offense, that he's given a straight red, we have to give racism a straight red card whenever the first incident occurs. And I support any player or team who walks off the field when they racist chants in the stands. And that game between PSG and I think a team from either Ukraine or Russia, where I think it was Demba Ba, who was very annoyed by the behavior, I think, of the PSG bench in an incident. And I supported that stand taken by Demba Ba and the rest of his teammates or the team to walk off. It's only when these things happen, Mike, when they take these drastic action against racism, that we're going to see an end to racism. So I need to see UEFA, I need to see FIFA, and I really being more proactive and being more bold to stamp out racism. It's not just about putting it on the TV screen or taking the knee before game or putting it on the sleeves of the players when they go to play. There must be some firm action demonstrated by UEFA and FIFA to stamp out racism.
Well, that is indeed that's our hope, but it's good, Colin, that look how our is just getting wrapping up, but I still want us to speak a little about I know we'll go when Vernon comes in the next hour, Vernon will speak about that, but from your point of view regarding sports in the OECS in particular, I know you spoke quite a lot about in Antigua and what's happening in Antigua, but overall in the OECS, and one who has covered sports within the OECS as well, what's your hope that for sports in the OECS in going forward? We know that we don't have the OECS Sports Desk, for example, anymore, and we don't have someone like the Red Pereira who used to move throughout the OECS to ensure that not just volleyball, not just football, not just table tennis, but even sports as squash, and others are played and are competitive enough indeed. But what's your hope of sports in the OECS probably in the next? I know you like to use the 5-year. the 5-year
I just want to make sure I give the powers that be enough time. I don't want to put them into a tightrope situation where I give them at least maybe 2 years. But quite frankly, first, I think if the OECS heads of governments would have would establish an initiative, maybe at their next summit, mandate that the ministers of sports meet, whether virtually or in person, mandate the ministers of sports to reconvene sports at the sub-regional level, reconstitute the OECS Sports Desk with a director, a staffing, and move it from there. And what they can also do in every Ministry of Sports in the OECS countries, have a sub-desk, an OECS Sports sub-desk, maybe a 2 or 3 member staff, looking at how they can get the national association in their respective countries now to recognize the fact that we need to have OECS sports back. And if the heads set that initiative in motion and the ministers of sports follow through, and the various ministries of sports set up a desk to look at sports redevelopment or the redevelopment of sports in the OECS, then I see it can happen. And something like that should take 6 to 12 months to put in place from a policy and administrative point of view. And then I expect from an operational and execution point of view that we should have sports at the sub-regional level sometime between late 2003, early 2004, but certainly not later than 2025. When I say I'm saying 2023, late 2022 to 2023, and certainly by 2024, we should have some level of competition. If it can happen sooner, the more the better.
And you're saying that in the context of most of the islands in the OECS now have, facilities, international standard sporting facilities. Whether it's Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent,
right. There's a great sporting complex. I took my young Warriors footballers to Montserrat in 2017. And the youngsters who were between, let's say, ages 11 to 16, they were amazed to see the level of the facilities in Montserrat. The training facilities were excellent. The playing facilities were excellent. The dressing room, the stands, great. And since 2007, there has been the development of a number of sporting facilities in the OECS region. We talk about the Cerritos Stadium in Antigua. You talk about Dominica's sports stadium being developed, although it was affected by the hurricane I think in 2017, 2018. I think it has been renovated. You talk about, Grenada as well, St. Lucia with the Darren Sammy sports stadium and other facilities there. So there are a number of relatively new or facilities that would have been developed since OECS Sports would have taken a backseat sometime around the mid to late 2000 or so. So the facilities are there, and it's just now to have active competition. You spoke about squash. There is a squash facility in English Harbour in Antigua that has not been used for a number of years because there's just no local squash program.
Well, I could tell you there's a squash facility adjacent to the Grenada the Kirani James Athletic Stadium that was actually built. But as you said, there's no squash played in Grenada as well.
So we really need to revive sports at the sub-regional level, at the OECS level, because it's not everybody is going to represent their respective national teams at the Olympic or the World Cup qualifying level. But if they can make their national team to play in an OECS event. And one of the big things about OECS sports, which we didn't even touch on, was the whole question of club sports. There are a lot of club competitions. So the player who was just good enough to play for his club could have gone to represent his club overseas in an OECS event, and that also helped to foster the development of other athletes in the various clubs.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Colin. It has been a pleasure, chatting with you. Hope we can do it all over again some other time in the future. I want to wish you all the best with SportsWorld. As you said, the next edition will be out when?
Sunday, tomorrow. We're
on
actually
Sunday.
working in that as we speak, and we're aiming to have it out by midnight tonight, or by 6 o'clock Sunday morning.
Okay.
And and as I've encouraged persons to do, if you want to get a copy, just email me at high stakes media groups groups with an S at Gmail, or SportsWorld Antigua at gmail.com.
Okay, right. Okay, then. Thank you very much, Colin.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and I look forward to hearing Vernon's dissertation.
Yeah, okay then. Thank you very much. Okay then, right. So, folks, that's Colin James live from Buckley's in Antigua, and without giving us an update as what's happening, all about SportsWorld Antigua, and as you saw that it's very colorful and updated indeed. I've received my copies, and as he indicated, I will try to post the email addresses, as he mentioned, that you can make a request if you want to be added to the subscription list. It's very informative. This is one thing I can tell you, and I want to thank Colin for being part of our program.